Hey guys, what's up? It's Jenna here. Welcome to Youth Group at Home edition. I am so glad you are with us. We are continuing a series today called Bigger Picture, and we will have small groups following on Zoom, so I hope you join us following this message from YouTube. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our channel and press the like button. So we are in the last week of our series, Big Picture, about a guy named Joseph who has some crazy, wild, insane, and just unthinkable things happen to him in his life. And all along, even when he can't see the bigger picture, God is with him. And so we're going to finish up his story today. But before we do that, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever wanted to get a little payback, like revenge? Like think Carrie Underwood before he cheats, or a Taylor Swift song where she's getting back at somebody. Sweet revenge. Well, we've all been wronged, right? Maybe you've had a sibling take something from yours or eat your leftovers that you know was yours. Or maybe you can think of a time when you were little, when your little brother came in and turned off the TV in front of all of your friends, and you were furious and you just picked up and threw whatever you could at him. Well, we've all been wronged. I can remember one time in middle school when one of my best friends had a friend who made her sign a contract promising that she wouldn't be friends with me anymore. And she signed it. I remember being so hurt. I remember thinking, I wish she would just stop being friends with her. And honestly, I did not get revenge. I more just felt sorry for myself. But sometimes revenge looks a little bit different. Like that feeling of playing over and over and over in your head of like, maybe there's this quiet peace. You start thinking negative things about somebody else, or you just want them to have something like that happen to them. So it's maybe not always like straight out something you plot, but it could be just a subtle in your head kind of victory of thinking bad things about them or wanting bad things to happen to them too. It's that whole inner force, right? We've all had bad things happen to us, things that were unfair and unjust, and shots that people have taken at us that were just wrong. And you can relate to being wronged and wanting that person to get what they have coming to them. And we all actually do have the capacity for payback. We have that option. And maybe your story is like you knocked someone in the face, or you did something crazy like blasted somebody on social media, or maybe it's a little more subtle, like you started a small rumor about somebody, or maybe it's all in your head, but you think these horrible things about them, and in your mind you've won. Sometimes we want payback and we want revenge because it feels fair. But whether or not it feels fair doesn't mean it is fair or just, and doesn't always mean that that's the best case scenario. And doesn't always mean that that's what's really best for us. Now, if there's anyone in the Bible who I would say would be able to really make a justification for payback, it's our friend Joseph. You've heard a little bit about Joseph's story. Joseph was hated by his brothers. They tried and thought about killing him, then instead they sold him into slavery, thanks, right? Then he got sold into slavery. He ended up being pursued by his boss's wife, and then she wrongly accused him of something, of having an affair, and then he ends up in prison, and then he finally gets out of prison. Like, his life is crazy. Enough bad things have happened to him that you would think that he, of all people, are done with people messing with him, right? I would think he'd have lots of justification to be able to get his payback. So let's pick up back at Joseph's story. At this point, he is actually a very important person. He's only second to Pharaoh. After he interpreted a dream for the Pharaoh, which is basically the king of Egypt, he was able to have the power to do basically whatever he wants. I mean, if somebody messes with him, he can do almost anything. He is put in this powerful position, and at this time, there is a famine in Egypt and the surrounding areas, a famine, also a food shortage, right? And this food shortage is going to go on for years, and people are starving, and they're coming to Egypt, and they're coming to Joseph to be able to get help for their problem. Now, of all the people to walk in and visit Joseph asking for help, guess who comes to visit? His brothers. Can you imagine? And guess what? Joseph immediately recognizes his brothers, but his brothers don't recognize him, because who would have thought? Joseph has been gone for many years now, and they thought of him probably as good as dead, right? In slavery, they definitely did not expect to go to Egypt and see him in such a position of power. So what happens? Let's read what happens to Joseph's story. Joseph could stand it no longer. There were many people in the room, and he said to his attendants, "Out, all of you." So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and wept. He wept so loudly the Egyptians could hear him, and word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. "I am Joseph," he said to his brothers. "Is my father still alive?" But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of him. "Please, come closer," he said to them. So they came closer, and he said again, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset, and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. You can live in the region of Goshen, where you can be near me with all of your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and everything you own. I will take care of you there. For there are still 5 years of famine ahead of us. Otherwise, you and your household and all your animals will starve." From Genesis chapter 45. Wait, what? Like, Joseph could have literally done anything. He could have at least, cast him a little shade, say something a little bit harsh. But what do we see in Joseph's response? Forgiveness and a recognition that God is using him to do amazing things. A recognition that his life has brought to this moment, and he has this amazing power to save his whole family, regardless of how they treated him. Wow. Joseph just demonstrates integrity and this amazing sense of grace. It's just incredible. You see, instead, he chose forgiveness. I mean, how amazing is that? Could you imagine just how surprised his brothers must have been? Could you imagine being his brothers? I mean, if I heard all of a sudden that it was Joseph, I would have just thought, we are doomed. We're going to die, right? But what we can learn from Joseph's story is when you can't see the bigger picture, choose to forgive. Joseph's response to his brothers gives us a powerful example of how God wants us to deal with the people who wrong us. We may never know why they did what they did. They may never apologize for the hurt or embarrassment they've caused us. There are details of the bigger picture that we'll never see or understand. But we still have a choice: forgiveness or payback. And we have the power to choose. Think of it this way. If you're in a relationship with another person, a parent, a friend, a sibling, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, anyone, there's something that connects the two of you, and there's a bridge. But when someone wrongs or hurts you, that bridge is suddenly broken. It becomes shaky and the communication breaks down. And it is so much harder sometimes to be a bridge builder rather than somebody who gets rid of the bridge. You see, hurting people hurt people. And at some point, it's time for us to end the cycle. You see, Joseph very well had every reason for his intentions of everything he's gone through. I wouldn't even blame him if he at least said something kind of mean to his brothers. But no, that wasn't Joseph. He chose forgiveness. And you know what? He was better for it. See, revenge wouldn't have made him better in this situation. Actually, his amazing ability and capacity to choose to love, to choose to be following God's will for his life and to help his family, was just an incredible way that Joseph displays his character and makes him a better person, living more fully into the life that God had for him. But of course, rebuilding bridges like Joseph did, that sounds nice and all, but like when somebody really does wrong you and does something terrible to you, how do you forgive? Now, there are definitely some scenarios where people do some just horrible, abusive things to you, and you shouldn't necessarily go back and restore the relationship to where it was, right? But there is definitely steps in any scenario that we can take for forgiveness. I'm sure some of you are hearing this and thinking, yeah, sure, that sounds nice, but how do you actually do that? How do you go from a place of seeking forgiveness to wanting payback? And that's a really fair question. Forgiveness is really hard, and it doesn't happen just in one moment. So here are some ways we can get started. First, start small. Practice small ways of extending grace, peace, and forgiveness to others. Like maybe when your friends tease you and they think they're just being funny, or when your siblings really go and eat those last leftovers that obviously had your name on it, or they do something else that annoys you. Start practicing those small gestures of forgiveness, and that will help and make a big difference when those big things come up. It will be part of your practice and will feel a little bit more easy. Second of all, forgive first. Think about your own life. Who has wronged you recently? You do not need them to come and ask for forgiveness for you to start forgiving them. That's the amazing thing about forgiveness, is you can begin to do that work in your heart right now. And the third thing, pursue forgiveness. We can't always control the way people treat us, but we can control the way we treat them in response. We can pursue forgiveness. What would it look like for you to forgive someone right now who has hurt you? And believe me, this isn't easy stuff. Sometimes you may think you have forgiven someone and then you're reminded of that thing they do and it just hurts inside. But what would it look like for you to make that next step or next gesture in the area of forgiveness? Maybe you unblock one of your friends on social media that you've been really mad at. Maybe you invite somebody to sit with you again. Maybe you send somebody a text and say that you were thinking of them. What does it look like for you to start in that area of forgiveness? And if you're really having a hard time trying to figure out how to forgive someone, it is very valuable to talk to someone that you trust. Maybe a mentor, a parent, someone who you know you can trust coming and saying, hey, what does forgiveness look like in this situation? And can you hold me accountable to that? And one of the things I really want you to know is that even though forgiveness is not always easy, we have an incredible God who is here with us. Just as we saw in Joseph's story, God is with us even when we don't see him. And so if you take some time and you pray to God and you ask for him to help you forgive somebody else, he will come alongside you, and you do not have to do it alone. And remember, when you can't see the bigger picture, choose to forgive. Joseph's story is pretty crazy, right? I mean, this guy goes from being thrown into a well, hated by his brothers, sold into slavery, pursued to have an affair, lived with integrity, however, still got set up, put into prison, and then eventually ends up with enough power in Egypt to be second in command, helping save lives. I mean, he definitely did not see the bigger picture. But here's the thing. Joseph couldn't see the bigger picture, but he kept trusting God. He kept believing in God, and he kept knowing that God had a plan for his life. And God used him to do incredible things beyond what he ever could have imagined. And you know what? I think that could be our very story, is that even when we don't see the bigger picture of everything that's going on now, and when times are tough, God is still with us, and He's right beside us and working alongside us. And so remember, when you can't see the bigger picture, choose to forgive. As we close our conversation about Joseph and how he forgave his brothers, I want you to think about this question. What is the hardest thing about choosing to forgive? Guys, I am so glad that you joined us for youth group at home. We are going to head into small groups, and I look forward to talking with you there about this bigger picture, and I hope you all have a great week. See you soon.